Have you ever walked into a room and felt every eye subtly shift your way, even though you said nothing? Not because of what you wore, not because of your title, but because there was something about your presence, something people couldn't explain, but couldn't ignore either. That is power, and it has nothing to do with volume. If you've ever felt that your silence speaks louder than the noise around you, if you've ever noticed that when you say less, people listen more, then what you're about to hear isn't just a video, it's a mirror. Because in a world that rewards those who scream the loudest, there is a rarer, more dangerous power, the one that comes from within. And those who master it don't need to prove anything. They shift reality simply by being. In this video, we won't talk about popularity. We won't talk about fake confidence or motivational quotes. We'll talk about something far more difficult and infinitely more powerful: emotional mastery. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that earns respect without asking. The kind that turns stillness into strategy. Let me tell you a story. There was a man. He never raised his voice in meetings, never interrupted, never rushed to speak. People often overlooked him, until the moment he did speak. Then, the entire room shifted. He said few words, but they hit like steel. Not because they were perfect, but because they were backed by presence. He had mastered the art of silence. He had nothing to prove, because he had already proven it to himself. He didn't seek validation, and that's why everyone sought his approval. This video is not for those looking to be liked. It's for those ready to be respected. It's for those who are done chasing noise and ready to build presence. So if you've ever felt like the world misunderstands your stillness, or if your silence has been mistaken for weakness, then you already know you're not made for noise. You're built for impact. And before we go further, drop this in the comments if it speaks to your truth. My silence is not weakness. It is a warning. Let them read it, let them wonder, and never let them be sure. There's a moment when someone enters a room and nothing is said, yet everything changes. It's not the walk, not the clothes, not the gaze. It's something else. A tension in the air, a quiet authority. That makes even the loudest pause. We've all seen it. That one person who doesn't demand attention, yet somehow owns the room. Who doesn't need to raise their voice, because the silence around them speaks louder. But what is it? What gives a person that level of presence? It's not charm, it's not arrogance, it's control. Inner, relentless, unshakable control. In a world obsessed with being seen, there's something disarming about the one who doesn't try. They don't rush. They don't compete for attention. They observe. They breathe. And when they move, it's with purpose. That is when silence becomes a force, a gravitational pull, not absence, but presence, condensed. You feel it, don't you? That slight unease others feel around them, not because they're dangerous, but because they're unreadable. And what you can't read, you can't predict. And what you can't predict, you cannot control. The world tries to define you, label you, make you fit into its noisy templates. But when you don't play that game, when you choose silence over reaction, stillness over validation, you start to become something else, something rare, something unsettling. You become the exception. People start wondering, who is he? Why does he make me uncomfortable? Why does he feel different? And the answer is simple. Because you've mastered something they've avoided all their lives. You've learned to sit in silence without needing to fill it, to be with yourself without needing approval, to walk through chaos without losing your center. You don't need to explain your value. You are your own evidence. And that is terrifying to those still trying to prove themselves. Let the noise compete for attention. Let the performers exhaust themselves under the spotlight. You're not here for that. You're not here to impress. You're here to remain untouched, unbothered, unmoved, because power, real power, is not loud. It's not flashy. It's silent. It's patient, and it waits behind steady eyes and an unreadable face. So next time you walk into a room, don't speak, don't rush, don't perform, just be. Let the silence do the heavy lifting, and if you've ever felt like you don't belong in the noise, maybe it's because you weren't meant to be part of it. Maybe you were built to rise above it. If that feels true, comment, "I carry presence, not noise." Let them feel the difference. There's a myth that the louder you speak, the more powerful you are, that attention equals influence, that presence must be performed. But what if I told you the opposite is true? The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one yelling. It's the one watching, the one you forget until it's too late. The loud demand attention, the quiet command it, because silence is not emptiness. It's a weapon. You see, those who speak constantly are often broadcasting their insecurities. They seek validation. They fill silence because silence is unbearable, because silence exposes them. But the one who doesn't need to speak, who listens more than they talk, who waits before they act, that's the one who's thought 5 steps ahead. That's the one whose stillness is strategy. And that scares people. Because you can't argue with someone who doesn't engage. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't need your approval. You can't intimidate someone who's not playing the same game. There's a reason ancient warriors meditated before battle. There's a reason kings chose their words with surgical precision. There's a reason the greatest minds in history were often the most reserved. Because they understood one truth: power dissipates when you give it away in noise. And here's where it gets real. Society tells you, be open, be expressive, be authentic. But what they really mean is, show us everything so we know how to control you. And you've started to realize that your silence makes others uneasy. They question you, they prod you, they try to break your stillness, because it mirrors their chaos. But you don't move, because you've learned. The moment you react, you give them power. The moment you explain, you invite judgment. The moment you speak just to fill space, you dilute your presence. And that's not who you are. You're the kind of person who walks slowly but arrives with purpose, who listens deeply but speaks only when it matters, who knows that the most feared predator is the one you never hear coming. So when they call you quiet, smile. When they say you're distant, nod. When they try to provoke you, remain still. Because your calm isn't confusion, it's calculation. Let the world underestimate you. Let them talk. Let them assume. Just don't let them be right. The ones who don't need to speak to make impact are the ones who change everything silently. And if this resonates with who you are or who you're becoming, leave this in the comments. Quiet is my camouflage. Stillness is my strength. Let them wonder, not what you're doing, but what you're planning. There's a quiet exhaustion that comes from always needing to prove yourself. It doesn't scream, it doesn't collapse, it just wears you down. Every achievement becomes a performance. Every opinion becomes a battlefield. Every silence feels like a missed opportunity to defend your worth. But have you ever stopped and asked yourself, who are you proving it to? The people scrolling past your life? The strangers who never cared to understand you? Or maybe to yourself? There's a man I once knew. He was brilliant, truly. But every room he entered, he felt he had to earn space. Had to assert, had to impress, had to win. He spoke with force. He argued with precision. He laughed the loudest, smiled the widest, but when he was alone, he was tired. And not the kind of tired sleep could fix. Because when your worth is tied to reaction, you become a prisoner of applause. And applause, my friend, is the most fleeting currency on earth. He called me one night and said, I don't even know if I'm speaking or performing anymore. That hit me. Because so many of us are caught in that same play, performing for validation, reacting for recognition, proving we matter, louder, faster, more desperately each time. And in doing so, we forget the one audience that truly counts: ourselves. You don't need to speak to prove your intelligence. You don't need to share your pain to validate your strength. You don't need to expose your every emotion to show you're human, because every time you explain yourself to people who never asked to understand you, you shrink, you become smaller than your truth, and worse, you start believing you have something to prove, just to exist. But here's what the masters have always known: those with the deepest confidence prove nothing, they just are. No explanations, no performances mistaken for personality, just presence. And when you reach that level of emotional clarity, you stop trying to convince anyone. You start choosing who deserves access. You reclaim your voice by using it less. You reclaim your energy by not wasting it on those who only hear noise. So next time you feel the need to defend your choices, explain your worth, justify your silence, pause, ask yourself, who am I really speaking for? And if the answer isn't yourself, don't. Because the world doesn't need more performers, it needs more presences. And if you've ever felt this weight, comment this below: I'm done performing, I'm here to be. Let that be your quiet rebellion, your turning point, your shift, because the day you stop proving is the day you start becoming. There's a moment right before you snap, when your heart races, your fists clench, your words sharpen, and in that split second, you have a choice: react or rule yourself. Most people don't choose. They react. They let anger speak for them. Let insecurity write their responses. Let fear drive their decisions. And just like that, they lose power. Because here's the harsh truth: the one who reacts is no longer in control. When your emotions are on display, you become readable. And what can be read can be manipulated. They know what buttons to push. They see the cracks in your armor, and they use them because you showed them how. You think you're being real, but what you're actually being is vulnerable to those who don't deserve access. Now, don't confuse this. We're not talking about suppressing your humanity. We're talking about mastering it. There's a brutal beauty in the man who feels everything, but chooses what the world sees, in the leader who could destroy with a word, but chooses silence, in the warrior who burns with fire inside, but moves with calm precision. Why? Because restraint is strength, and strength isn't measured by the volume of your roar, but by your ability to whisper when everything inside you screams. Let's take a simple example. Imagine someone insults you publicly, attacks your character, mocks your calm. The crowd watches. They wait for your retaliation. You could lash out, tear them apart with words, win the moment and lose the long game. Or you could smile, say nothing, let their noise echo into their own silence. Because when you don't react, you force them to sit with their own chaos. That's dominance, psychological, quiet, and devastating. You see, emotional exposure is a currency. Every time you spend it carelessly, you make yourself cheaper. But when you keep it in, hold it, master it, you become expensive, rare, unshakable. So here's the test. Next time you're triggered, can you stay still? Can you remain unreadable? Can you walk away? Not because you're weak, but because you refuse to give them your fire. If you can, you're not avoiding the battle, you're winning it without stepping onto the field. And that is a level of control most never reach. So if you're learning to own your emotions, not by displaying them, but by directing them, comment this: my silence is not surrender, it's dominance. Let them misunderstand, let them guess, because they can't play a game they don't know the rules to, and you're the one writing them. In every room, every relationship, every negotiation, there is a silent player. The one who doesn't speak first, the one who doesn't react, the one who seems unreadable. That person isn't passive. They're calculating. Because silence, when intentional, is not emptiness, it's preparation. You see, most people live in emotional reaction. Something happens, they respond. Someone insults, they defend. They get ignored, they overcompensate. But the strategist doesn't respond to every stimulus. They choose their battles, they preserve their energy. And because of that, they remain in control. Think about the most powerful leaders in history. The ones who changed nations, shifted movements, rewrote systems. Were they the ones shouting? Or were they the ones who waited for the exact moment and then moved like thunder? They weren't impulsive, they were deliberate. They understood that emotional chaos is a liability and emotional discipline is leverage. You don't win influence by being loud. You win it by being precise, by choosing when to speak, when to stay silent, when to look away, and when to strike without warning. Because here's the truth no one tells you. The person who controls the tempo controls the outcome. If you let others set the emotional pace, you're always chasing their lead. But if you hold steady, if you maintain your internal rhythm, they adjust to you. Suddenly, you're not reacting to the world. The world starts reacting to you. This isn't about manipulation. It's about intention. You're not here to suppress your feelings. You're here to understand them so well that they serve you, never enslave you. And that's emotional strategy. It's not cold. It's clear. It's knowing that your energy is currency and every reaction is a transaction. You either spend it or you invest it. So here's a question. When was the last time you paused before responding, before correcting, before proving? Because that pause, that breath, that restraint, that's where real power begins. And if you want to become the kind of person who can walk into chaos and not be moved, you have to start choosing calm even when war is screaming in your chest. So if you felt that shift, if you're learning to be the one who watches while others burn themselves out, comment this: I move on purpose, not by pressure. Let them feel the weight of your quiet decisions. Let them realize you're not here to be seen. You're here to make impact silently. There's a type of presence that doesn't need introduction. It's not loud, it's not forced, but when it enters the room, everyone adjusts. That is psychological presence. It's the image people hold of you, not based on what you say, but on what you choose not to say. Most people live exposed, like storefronts with every item on display. No mystery, no depth, no edge. They post everything. They explain everything. They reveal their fears, their dreams, their wounds on demand. But the powerful, they build an image intentionally, like architects of perception. They know what is not seen is often feared, and what is feared is respected. You don't need to lie, you just need to control the narrative. And sometimes the best way to do that is to leave blank pages in your story. Let them wonder. Let them guess if you're calm or planning, if you're silent out of grace, or because you're 10 steps ahead. Let them misinterpret your stillness as weakness until it's too late. This is not deception, it's design. The best chess players don't show all their pieces. The best generals don't reveal the full map. The most magnetic people don't seek attention. They become it. Because mystery is memory glue. People forget what they see too much of, but they remember what confused them, what intrigued them, what didn't fit the pattern. So if you're always available, always talking, always proving, you become predictable. And predictable is forgettable. But if you master the art of holding back, if you become that presence that no one can quite define, you enter their minds in a way noise never could. They might not like you, they might not even trust you, but they'll remember you, and respect follows memory. So start crafting your image, not with exaggeration, but with intention. Choose your words like a sculptor. Reveal only what empowers. Withhold what dilutes. Leave space for interpretation, because that space, that gap between what they know and what they want to know. That's where your authority grows. And if you've ever felt like you're done being predictable, if you're tired of over-explaining, if you're ready to become a figure, not just a face, comment this: let them wonder who I really am. Let that become your signature, not written in ink, but in energy, because those who are unforgettable aren't the ones who show the most. They're the ones who leave you searching long after they've left the room. There's a rare kind of silence, the kind that doesn't seek approval, that doesn't apologize for taking space, that doesn't bend under scrutiny. It's the silence of someone who knows exactly who they are. No need to explain, no need to prove, no need to defend. And that is terrifying to the world, because the world is built on reaction. It wants you loud, it wants you insecure, it wants you dancing for validation. But when you sit still, unapologetically, you interrupt the pattern, you force the noise to look inward, you become the mirror that no one wants. But everyone remembers. There's a power that comes from fighting yourself and winning, from feeling the urge to speak, to lash out, to show them, and choosing restraint. Not from fear, not from weakness, but from mastery. Because when you've faced your own chaos, external chaos doesn't shake you. When you've spent time in your own silence, you stop fearing theirs. When you've found your worth internally, the world's judgments sound like whispers. There's a phrase I hold close: the man who kneels only to his own values cannot be made to bow by any man. That's who you're becoming. Not a statue, not a wall, but a presence so grounded, so deeply at peace with itself, that the world's noise bounces off you like rain on stone. And here's the irony: the quieter you become, the more people want to hear you. Not because you're withholding, but because your silence feels earned. It's the silence of someone who has walked through fire and no longer needs to scream about the scars. And when you hold that kind of presence, you don't chase attention, you choose moments, and the world listens, not because it's forced to, but because it feels it should. So if you're learning to stand still when others shake, to breathe slow when others rush, to remain whole when others fall apart, you're not just silent, you're becoming unbreakable. And if that resonates, if you're tired of being misread and ready to be unshakable, comment this: I know who I am. That's enough. Let them hear your silence. Let them feel your peace. Because the world isn't built for men like you. But it remembers them long after the noise fades. Most people think silence is passive, that it's weakness, that it means you have nothing to say. But in the hands of the disciplined, silence becomes a weapon. Because perception is a game, and the one who plays it best isn't the one who talks most. It's the one who knows what you allow people to believe matters more than what's true. You see, when you speak, people measure you. When you react, people read you. When you explain, people label you. But when you stay silent, you become their projection. They fill in the gaps. They wonder what you're thinking. They question your motives. They invent stories. Because the mind hates uncertainty. And that is where your power begins. You're not intimidating because of your volume. You're intimidating because you force others to confront themselves, because you don't play the game of validation. Think of any intense negotiation. The one who speaks first often loses. Why? Because silence makes people uncomfortable. It pressures them to fill the void, and in doing so, they reveal their hand. It's not an accident. It's design. When you choose not to react, you break their script. You throw off their rhythm. You expose their desperation, because silence doesn't just hide your thoughts, it exposes theirs. Watch any heated conversation. The person who stays composed becomes the anchor, not because they have more facts, but because they have more control. So here's the secret. You don't have to attack to win. You just have to hold your center. Let them get loud. Let them over-explain. Let them reveal their insecurities. You sit, you observe, you wait. And when you speak, if you even do, Your words carry weight not because they're perfect, but because they were earned in restraint. And this isn't about manipulation. It's about awareness, knowing that silence, when chosen, becomes the loudest presence in the room. So next time they provoke you, don't bite, don't flinch, don't chase. Just look at them. Hold the moment. Let the silence echo. Because sometimes the strongest strike is not a strike at all. It's the refusal to dance. If you've ever turned silence into strength, comment this: I don't react. I redefine the room. Let them guess. Let them squirm. Let them see their reflection in your stillness, because you don't have to shout when your silence already speaks volumes. People judge what they can see. They label what they understand. They attack what they think they know. But what if they don't know you? What if they can't? There's a strange kind of safety and power in being unreadable. When people can't define you, they can't control you, they can't put you in a box, they can't anticipate your next move, and that makes you dangerous, not because you're hiding, but because you've chosen what to reveal, because you've decided to be deliberate with your exposure. Most people live like open books, all pages on display, no chapters withheld, desperate for others to read and validate them. But you? You're the book with missing pages, the story no one fully understands, the plot twist that doesn't need to shout to be unforgettable. That's why they talk. That's why they guess. That's why they get uncomfortable in your presence. You've become what they can't predict, and unpredictability is power. Because what they can't judge, they can't dismiss. You don't have to defend yourself when no one knows how to attack. You don't have to explain your choices when no one even knows your next step. You've moved beyond visibility. You've become influence. And here's the paradox. The more they know about you, the easier it is to destroy you. But the less they can grasp, the more they fear what might be hiding beneath the surface. So don't fear their discomfort. Let them wonder. Let them create myths around your stillness. Let your absence be louder than their noise. Because presence is not about being seen, it's about being felt without full access. Look at the most powerful figures in history. They weren't always in the spotlight. They were shadows that shaped movements. They were forces that couldn't be cornered. They were mysteries that refused to explain themselves. And that's what you're becoming. A presence, not a personality, a signal, not a spectacle. So if you've ever felt misunderstood, not because you're confusing, but because you're carefully constructed, leave this in the comments. They can't judge what they can't define. Let that be your armor, not built from walls, but from intentional design. Because in a world obsessed with exposure, the most dangerous thing you can be is unknown. There's something most people don't understand. Being remembered has nothing to do with being loud. The ones we remember aren't always the ones who shouted the most, who posted the most, who demanded attention. They're the ones who shifted something inside us without saying much at all. Because influence, real influence, isn't about presence. It's about impact. And impact doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives in complete silence, unannounced, unapologetic, undeniable. It's the calm voice that ends the argument, the steady hand that guides the chaos, the stillness in the storm that makes everyone else stop. The truth is, the world has enough people trying to be heard, enough noise, enough performers. What it doesn't have is enough people who move with weight. People who don't speak to be liked, who don't show up to be seen, who don't react just to prove they're alive, but instead, people who walk into a room and reset the energy without needing to announce it. That's what power looks like. It's not in the volume of your words, it's in the gravity of your presence. When you truly master yourself, you don't need confirmation. You don't need permission. You don't even need recognition. Because your life starts to speak louder than your voice ever could. People watch how you move, how you breathe, how you stay calm in moments that make others crumble. They remember the silence you kept, the the control you held, the fire you didn't unleash, and that's what builds respect. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. So here's the final truth. You don't need to be everywhere. You don't need to say everything. You don't need to convince anyone. You just need to be the one person who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't fade. And if you've ever felt like you were meant to leave a mark, not with noise, but with presence, then leave this one final phrase: I don't chase attention. I become unforgettable. Let that be the last thing they read. The last thing they remember, the first thing they feel when you enter a room next time, because in a world begging to be noticed, you'll be the one who is remembered, without needing to say a word.